First, I'd like to ask our audience some questions. How many of you here are running for honors? Raise your hand. How many of you already have a particular university you want or set to enter soon? And how many of you have a business to take over soon, right after you graduate? And how many of you have the goal of becoming successful in your 20s or your 30s? The truth is, in the Philippines and in other Asian countries, there's an enormous pressure from students to become successful not only in school, but to strive to be the best in everything. This is particularly true in the Chinese community because we're used to being surrounded by successful people who are excelling in whatever fields that they're in, may it be in arts, in business, in sports, and so on. It's how most, if not all of us, have been brought up. And it's become a tradition of some sorts if you're a Chinese Filipino. Next thing you know, you're grown up, you're starting your own family, and inherently, you also teach the same values and mindset to your children. It's like success and being successful are actually synonymous to being a Chinoy or a Chinese Filipino. And the moment that you fail, or even get close to failing, you tend to sacrifice a number of things. Your name, your ranking in school, money, relationship, and your reputation and image as part of the Chinese Filipino community. Are any of you here familiar with the concept of 面子? Essentially, in Chinese, the concept of 面子 directly relates to our image as Chinoys. When you're able to take care of your image, when you're able to have a good face, you're earning other people's respect. Alternatively, if you fail and damage your 面子, you lose respect, your dignity, your social hierarchy, and definitely there's a lot of shame that comes to it. As an achiever at a young age, myself, this is something I can relate to and still continue to observe in the modern Chinoy generation this time. Like many of you here, I once belonged to the upper echelon of the school. I was an achiever in elementary and in high school. And aside from doing that, I often represented the school in different competitions and events. This carried on to college and eventually after I graduated when I started a tech business. And we used to join several startup competitions which we eventually won. And because of that, we were able to get a lot of exposures from the media. And all of this happened in a short span of time, and I was just around 25 years old at that time. As successful our endeavors have become, problems have also piled up. And for me, failing is also imminent as a businessman. And what was inevitable was that serious problems start to crop up, and me being someone who was an achiever in school, everything was totally new to me. Because when I was still in school, I've never experienced any failure. So one of the things that I learned at that time was, in school, if you study hard, there's a big chance that you'll get a high grade. But it's the exact opposite in the real world. In the real world, even if you work hard, success is not a guarantee. So at the same time, my early achievements also got into my head. I think at that time, I became successful quite fast, and I was immature at that time. So eventually, what I did was I got into relationships that gave me security. And all of this became a learning experience of its own. So from the feeling of being on top of the world, I went crashing down and experienced my biggest failure at that age. And around this time, the first major turning point of my life happened. Upon entering my first relationship, I got swindled by my ex-girlfriend. I then faced a lot of BIR issues. I got warrant of arrest because of pending cases. And at the same time, my partner at that time in the technology company also hacked our system. This led to a very significant loss on the business and the eventual closure of my first ever business. While I was proud of the success that I was getting at that time, little did I know that experiencing it also meant dealing with these major setbacks that tested how strong and matured I am. So the next challenge for me was how to turn these learnings into an opportunity. the first two events actually forced me to become better. I changed myself. I tried to become better so that during that time, my maturity level went up a notch because I considered myself as an immature and a totally different person prior to this. All of this actually prepared me to meeting my wife. So when everything was put into perspective, I was able to meet my wife, and until now, after 12 years, our relationship have been smooth. And if not for the drastic change that I made in myself, I don't think it would be possible. And as for the third setback, the closure of the business actually, even how hard it was for me to let go because of the emotional attachment, it actually led me to being part of Chinoy TV, but this time with my family as my partners. This allowed me to actually apply all of the learnings that I got from that first failed business. At the same time, with Chinoy TV, it allowed me to create contents while at the same time giving back to the community that's very dear to me. And about a decade into being part of Chinoy TV, I faced my second major turning point. And as we all know, 2019 to 2019, we were hit by the COVID pandemic. And because of that, it actually forced us to stop for 2 years in production. But more than that, there was a major issue that happened. The Chinoy community experienced a different issue because we were getting a lot of racisms and negative comments brought by the pandemic. The mainstream market were blaming the Chinoy community that the COVID came from Wuhan, and then there's an island problem with China. And us being Chinoy TV, we were actually left at the middle of this crossfire because us being a Chinese-Filipino platform, people thought that we're actually part of that. So because of what happened, we actually took that as an opportunity. We took the initiative to combat the negative stigma that the Chinese-Filipino community is getting. So what we did was we reformatted Chinoy TV from a lifestyle magazine show into a documentary content. Now it's called Chinese by Blood, Filipino by Heart, which promotes oneness in the community. We've managed, after 40 episodes and after interviewing almost 100 individuals, we've managed to reignite compassion, pride, and understanding towards Chinoys who made a difference in the country in their own way. As though this wasn't enough of a roller coaster, I faced my third major setback just a few years later. So last November, my wife was diagnosed with a stage 3 gastric cancer. It is considered I consider that as my biggest life transformation. Without getting too much into the detail, my wife underwent 2 major surgeries in the span of 2 weeks. And the continuous trip to the hospital to get her treated and help her recover, and as both husband and a father to my young kids, this whole experience was the biggest battle that I faced after I got married. And it tested a lot of things in me, most especially setting of the priority. But I'm happy to share that as of now, my wife is cancer-free. And everything that we went through as a couple definitely made me a better person. It made me reevaluate my life as a person, as a husband, as a father, as a businessman, and you also learn to take each day as if it's the last. These 3 major setbacks and failed experiences might be unimaginable for most of you. But I think this is something that you can actually learn from as early as now as you move on to the next chapters of your life, whether as a student, a working professional, and eventually a husband, a wife, or a mother, eventually in your own way. So, what's the 3 learnings? First, although discouraging and damaging, failures and setbacks actually lead us to better directions in life. When we're young, it's actually our parents who map out everything. In school, it is done by our teachers. But when you're already in the real world, when there's enormous opportunities, it can also be the opposite. This setback sometimes serves as a compass of our life. And God's way of leading us to the right path. And based on my experience, they actually led me to be better. We just need to be open in experiencing them, no matter how hard it gets. Number 2, in life, we're usually focused on worldly success. And of course, I'm also guilty of that. Profit, awards, and material things. But what I learned was that what we do for the society, in the community, and the people around us, along with pursuing our purpose, is as equally important. Translating this to what we're doing now in Chinoy TV. Basically, right now, we run Chinoy TV like a social enterprise. There's a business objective and there's a social objective. And with the social objective, we want to make sure that we're able to create contents that would allow the Chinese Filipino community to embrace their identity, but also providing a platform that allows young Chinoys to showcase their talents, their skills, while being the best version of themselves and remembering the values and advocacies that are very dear to us as Chinese Filipinos. Number 3, learn to focus on things that are within your control and let go of things, let go or accept the ones that are not. So when my wife was diagnosed with the stage 3 cancer at 37 years old, our world felt like it was crumbling. But we decided to concentrate on the things that's within our control. Researching, finding the best medical solutions, trying to stay positive despite everything that was happening. And currently, my wife is close to her normal pre-diagnosis and even looks better, feels better than before. And we attribute this on how we saw and dealt the situation that's supposedly out of our control very early on. So, as I end this talk, I would like to share a quote from Confucius. This quote summarizes everything I talked about. A man is great not because he hasn't failed. A man is great because failure hasn't stopped him. I want you all to remember that sometimes, no matter how much we prepare, how hard we do things, failure will always be part of the experience. In fact, it's a chance for us to learn, to grow as a more matured individual, and ultimately become a better version of ourselves. Just like how I am now, because of my failed experiences, which I used to turn into something positive and worthwhile. When you fail, even if it's out of your control or you have no means to endure it, still do something about it because you actually have more in you than you think. You're considered modern Chinoys for a reason, and it is because you have the power and the privilege of combining the values and capabilities of two strong and empowered culture. Use them to your advantage. And before you know it, you will have ignited a potential in you far bigger and stronger than you think, than you imagine, that can handle life both in success and in failure. Thank you.